Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Odd Ones. It is me, Bjorn, and my gorgeous, beautiful wife, Lara, over there, who's looking stunning today. Um, Before we get started, a couple things. Lara's going to be running the show today because she is excited about a certain subject, and I am also still writing my book, or not writing my book, but writing my notes from my
One day.
book. Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, after that
Maybe.
mountain analogy,
Yeah, that was pretty good. Maybe I'll just write a book of analogies that I make up. Um,
Bjornisms.
yeah. So that being said, with these books, Larry, you know me. I have two of these in here, two of these little handy dandy notebooks. Um, you know what I'm gonna do with those notebooks, Larry?
Break my heart.
Yep. I'm going to
Not
as
before I photocopy them.
as I finish a book and write the notes or write whatever notes I write,
A
but
reading book or that book?
as I get done reading a book and finishing the notes in this notebook, I'm going to start giving out a signed copy of this notebook and whatever book I took notes on in that journal.
One day,
So
these signatures will be worth something.
maybe,
I mean,
Or they'll
they're
just be-
already worth something because they're worth something to me.
or they'll
especially
just be
what you
cool little
signed.
artifacts that people have. So if you want a signed notebook, and we'll go in more detail about our social medias and what we do on each one in a later video, but just keep an eye out on Facebook, Instagram, Thread, which is something I recently got into, and or YouTube. They
All
have
of
the
the
little
above.
social page there. Most likely the first place that you'll see it is Thread, if I had to guess. So keep an eye out on that. Hopefully
More
I'll
to come.
hopefully I'll be done with that shortly because I'm already on chapter 3 of that book and it's a lot.
Yeah.
But without any further ado,
Oh, you want to tell them what to do before we get into it?
oh yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that good jazz. And hopefully you'll like my new buttons that I created. See, look, I'll show them again. Okay, now that I got to show off my new like, subscribe, all that good stuff buttons, and the dogs interrupted us. Today is our anniversary.
Well, you just roll right into it. In my mind, it was like today is a very, very special episode.
Nope, you know how I am. I'm quick and straight to the point, and yeah.
Sometimes.
So
Wink.
today's our anniversary, 6 years of being together. What's today's date? Today is the 26th. Yep. And yeah, it's
326 on 6.
it's kind of
3 times 2 is 6.
she's getting mathematical on me. A little fun little quippet that I told you earlier, but I would like the audience to know. We were doing like a field trip for work, and we wound up on the same little area, which is now locked. It's not a public part of the dock anymore, but we got to go and explore that, and I got to show everybody that I work with. Unfortunately, you weren't there, but I was able to show everybody, hey, right there is where I proposed to
Did
Lara.
you really tell them that?
I did. I actually told him twice because there was a group that was like behind us, like 3 people that were behind us I didn't hear, and everybody's like, "Aw."
And ironically, not ironically, but coincidentally, you also probably walked right past, or you definitely had to walk right past where we also got married.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
across the way.
Let me see.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
No, you for sure, because it's the little grassy area that
I didn't. They did. They all walked over it, but
you've been there.
I wasn't there. I was cleaning up some palm fronds somewhere else. But as we were, or as we were working today, I, discovered a YouTube channel or a podcast channel that I haven't heard. You've watched some of their TikToks and stuff like that before. Their channel is called ADHD Love, and their podcast is phenomenal. I'm
Yes.
not even gonna lie. It is like listening to your inner dialogues outwardly and my outward dialogues outwardly.
That's fair.
Yep. So, Lara, you had some ideas based on the podcast that we listened to today?
Yes. So a couple things. Housekeeping,
Mhm.
or I don't want to call it housekeeping. I want to call it
Housekeeping.
I want to call it some free flight checklist.
Okay.
Bjorn and I were talking, and there are, much like ADHD Love, and she's also a musician, by
Yeah.
the way.
Who didn't get necessarily completely started in her career. Like, she did stuff in music, until she was over 40.
That's my girl.
Yeah.
So
That was pretty cool.
One of the things, I guess maybe, and this is more for me, and now that I'm glad that I said it out loud, that I couldn't really, it's hard when you have such a small or refined niche, right? Which is what a niche is. But the relationship arena niche, you are very similar to other content creators.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a hard time with that because it's like, well, what do we bring to the table that they don't? How do we do it differently?
Yeah.
Because I will admit that it took me a while to really become as passionate as you have been about doing the podcast. It's not that I didn't enjoy sitting in here and playing video games or whatever it was that we were doing with you.
Yep.
It's just that I did not, I guess my mind couldn't wrap around how we fit into that space, how I fit into this space and all that. But I really recognize now that we're watching these incredible inspirational people give their take and their own nuances to things that they see and consume, and all we're doing the same thing. So a different, essentially kind of like a reaction video without the videos, but we'll definitely link the video that inspired me to want to spend our anniversary in the studio, because it is, being in here with you, side note, is quality time. This is a time that I feel like we talk literally all the time. Like, I think you made the comment just a couple days ago about how you're getting ready to do a podcast, or we were talking about doing a podcast, and we talk about stuff all day long, and how that we can get into the studio and still have, even about the same topics, conversations that are just as enlightening or exciting or special. And yet we've been talking all day. And that's something I just love about us.
Yep. Yeah. I was thinking about Chris and Peaches, and like, they do recordings, and then they do lives, and then they do like Facebook lives on top of their Patreon lives. And I'm like, how do they find so much stuff to talk about? And then I think back about our conversations where we'll spend like 5 hours on the phone while we're working, and then we'll come home and freaking record, and then, get done recording and just hang out and talk.
Yep. And there's never a lack of things to talk about. And that really stands out to me, just thinking back to past relationships and of all kinds. Like, yeah, it's kind of like that best friend where you cannot talk for months and pick up the phone, but we talk every single day. And whether it be about something that we have heard, seen, experienced, we've never had an awkward, like, all right, well, we've talked about everything there is to talk about.
The well is dry.
Then my well is never dry.
Yep.
I love to talk, but I definitely have the most conversation and enjoy, thank goodness, talking to you, just because of your mind. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. So the second thing is, I'm really excited for us, but for myself, about my excitement about being in here and recording, soon to come, when the man, the magic, the editor, edits something, a little project that I'm going to be working on and am working on. And so stay tuned for that. But let's get into today's reaction to a very disclaimer. If you or anybody surrounding you is sensitive to sexual intimacy, now would be a time to go watch some of our other videos, or put in your headphones, whatever that is. But today, and much like they said, as you can see in the video that we'll link below, this is a hot topic, and I don't think that it's talked about enough from this perspective. And I had a lot of thoughts. I mean, way more than I thought. And it was only a 30-minute video.
Yeah.
So buckle up. Who knows how long it's going to be for us.
Yeah, this is a kind of not safe for work video.
Well, I would definitely say, depending on where you work, it's very, I think
if you work at a church, this is not appropriate.
Depending on what kind of church you're at. And I would say that some of the conversation is going to be taboo. We will definitely broach the commentary about sexual trauma. I don't think we're going to get too much into that, but I will give a trigger warning before we get into that because I think the rest of the concepts are worth hanging out with us. So, without further ado, I'm just going to follow along with the video. We'll ping pong, but I just made some notes and talking about, when you first get together, that very intense, lustrous, I don't even know if that's a word. It is now. Just that lusty sex that like
you aggressively said that quietly and whispered it all at the same time.
I had so many.
You said, thanks.
We shoved all the kids in the room and prefaced, you don't want to hear this. Anyway, which we'll talk about open dialogue with children at some point. Not.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, so I would say that it's fair that we, are you already bored?
Yeah.
Thanks. We as humans naturally, and I know that the internet has given it a new context, but I think we still looking at pictures or whatever have to be sexually attracted. There are exceptions to that, to the person that we're with. And in the beginning, I feel like if you guys are anything like us, that intensity is intense. And, I just remember kissing you before because we didn't go right into it.
Forget kissing. Whenever we first got together, we couldn't look each other in the eyes, and now look at us.
I know.
We're like pros at looking at each other in the eye.
Sometimes it's still intense.
Yeah.
It was super intense. And, just being, sorry.
What?
I just got flustered. Being around each other just in the physical presence was like.
Yeah.
So when we dove into the world of actually doing it, I mean, there were days where 3-4 times a day or staying up all night.
Yeah.
And it was just like, rabbits is an understatement,
We made the rabbits jealous.
Yes, we did. And that was great. When we met, you were in your mid-20s, and I was in my early 30s. And
look at you.
Huh?
I said, look at you.
I know. Wow. Technically, there's not a 10-year age gap, so I'm just.
You're one of the big cats. I can't remember which one it is, but.
Puma would have been the age bracket. I didn't know there was a difference. Anyway, so would you say it's fair that in the beginning, most people have that intense, like we're doing it all the time?
Yeah, it's like supercharged lust. I mean, it's almost like if you're in a relationship, not just doing it. I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not on Facebook. I mean, on YouTube. But if you're just doing it, right? A one night stand, we'll say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not feeling these same ways, right? But if you're starting a relationship, a lot of people aren't, getting it on the first date or the first couple of dates. And like for us, we didn't do anything sexual until months down the road. We were pretty much celibate for that time. And that just increases the intensity. And so once it finally happens, it's like, nope, got to keep on hitting that honey jar.
Oh my gosh.
Honey pot.
Winnie the Pooh in it. Sorry, this is the Pooh that got me.
Yeah.
It
was the Winnie that got me.
I figured. It was the. So, and I feel like, if you look at like the honeymoon phase, I don't know. I do know. I'd never experienced something that intense. And age and experience, like I've dated before, and I, even in like just dating, you still are attracted to the person you're with, even if you never end up having sex,
Yep.
But what I felt with you was far beyond expectations. And I did not know that honeymoon phase existed, the puppy dog stage, if you will. And so I kind of dove in where I was like, this is never going away. Like, because it was, I mean, our honeymoon phase lasted for months.
Yeah.
And, we didn't sleep a lot. Um, but it's almost comical to look at then versus now,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought, man, that was amazing. I'll get to that so it doesn't sound like I'm saying anything negative, but like that overwhelming desire versus today. So, like, if you had to look at where we were and where we are now, like the lust versus love, I think you really helped me understand that,
Mm-hmm.
because I did not. And we'll talk a little bit about that coming up. But what's your perspective on that?
Lust versus love.
Like honeymoon phase,
Oh,
lust, whatever, versus when you've settled in and, you know,
yeah. Lust is fun. That time at the beginning, it's fun, but it's not reality. It's like trying to live in a dream and always chasing that. Um, versus
not sponsored,
wow.
but this is wonderful.
Um, but versus love, which is to me obviously way more important. Like actually liking the person that you're with.
I
And
hope that you like them if you
yeah,
are. I mean, there are no shame in a friends with benefits or a booty call.
I mean, there's a
But
lot of people that nowadays, especially that just go on Tinder and that's what they do for the night and
Mhm.
that's it. Unpaid hooker.
Mhm.
You know, so love is a lot more important to me. The it's like I've always said, the sex, the looks, all that stuff will fade away. And what's going to be left is our personalities. I mean, our memory might not even be there anymore, but hopefully, even in memory loss,
What were we talking about?
get out of here. Hopefully, even in memory loss, we'll still have our personalities and be able to like kind of recognize each other and stuff like that. Are you trying to take my shoe off?
I am.
Come
We
on.
always play footsies under the camera.
So, yeah. And the difference between the two is one is almost childish in a way. Obviously, adults can feel, and even you know elders, people who have lost a husband or got a divorce later in life or lost a wife, I didn't want to keep it one-sided there. But somebody who's lost somebody and then found somebody else, they can still get that giddiness and that childlike, emotion again. But no matter what, it's still going to fade away, and
Settle in. And
yep.
maybe fade isn't the right word, but
It's almost
die
like
down.
a what like filling a cup up with sand in it.
Oh, here we go.
Yep. And whenever you first fill that cup up, everything's sporadic, everything's going around and it's all crazy. But after a few minutes, you watch that cup and everything settles down to the bottom. And what you have left is a, clear, life sustaining water.
Talking about sand or water?
Huh? I'm saying the sand's on the bottom, but you can drink the water on the top.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm trying to make
You
some kind of
tried.
analogy.
Tried too hard that time. One of the things they mentioned in the video is the social expectations. I don't know that I was necessarily influenced by the social expectations. I mean, they made a very good point that there are magazines about how to please your man, and these 5 things will drive her crazy, and whatever. And I wouldn't say that I was ever really influenced by that. Like and we'll get to how those things can be helpful, but
Mhm.
um, I just knew that, like, having seen movies and things like that intensity
Mm,
was something that, based on where I was and based on those movies, like I I didn't know that I hadn't experienced it until I experienced it. You
mhm.
know what I mean? So I think there's like this expectation that that's always going to be there,
Yep.
and it's just not.
Yep.
And that can be hard for somebody who, once you're hooked on that, like once you've had a taste of that,
Mhm.
like it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't ever want to let this go. And then you recognize, like, I did not understand at the time why. And it wasn't till I mean, just probably I mean, really today,
Mhm.
I got any of why it felt that way. But for me personally, I, even then, when we would go a few days without having sex,
Mm-hmm.
I started to feel like something was wrong.
Yep.
I started to feel like, well, he must not be into me, because I remembered that supercharged, like we couldn't get in the door fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
Or like we would be out in public and it would just be like radiating
Yep.
off of us. And especially me, like I just, oh,
Yeah,
and
you're kind of, whenever you get in that mood, you're kind of like a cat in heat. You just are always pawing at it. Um, Talking about the social expectations, though, I I really enjoyed the two perspectives that they gave,
mm-hmm,
where she was like, "Oh, it's my responsibility as a woman to kind of please him, keep it spiced up, be always ready." Where he is more like, "Oh, we're more supposed to be good at it," and that is true. Like a lot of you know, in high school, whenever the other people were talking about, you know, oh yeah, I had my first time, or like me and my girlfriend are doing this, and then because I was friends with a lot of girls, they'd be like, oh yeah, he kind of sucks, and it's like, oh geez, like I gotta be good whenever,
performance.
yeah, and then it's like if you have bad days and you're stressed out, like there was probably a week almost where I was just so completely stressed out for some reason. Normally I don't show kind of stress, and couldn't do anything. Like
Right.
I was just like absolutely, useless pretty much. Um, and that was stressful. And then another thing is that they didn't talk about is the world, especially with the social media and everything like how it is today, where everything's kind of pervy.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of posts specifically from women where it's like, oh, he has to have the 666 rule. Or they have to, have you never heard of that?
No, and I don't know what post you're talking about, because I'll get
I've
into
I've
that
heard
part.
it plenty of times from different podcasters. I've heard it on To Be
Go for
Better.
it.
So the 666 rule is 6 foot, 6 figures, 6 inches.
Well, I guess I'm on the other side of the internet, where I would tend to agree with this. Go ahead and finish what you're saying,
Yeah.
because I want to go back to that.
So with, talking to other guys, talking to, or hearing things from women, and also, corn, you have this expectation of a man, like you have to be big or you're not going to be any good. And, you hear a lot of people say, oh, it's
It
not
ain't the size of the worm; it's how you wiggle it.
yeah, that's not the analogy I was gonna use, but yeah. Um, but they don't realize, and they haven't done research. Like most men don't research and realize that a 12 foot, I mean a 12-inch donger is not
Golly.
the that is not the average size. 8 inches isn't the average size. 5 inches is the average size. I think it's even less than that, but I think 5 inches is the average
I think
size.
we've looked it up before.
Yeah,
You got Google. Be careful on there.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so many different things as a guy. I know there's different kind of pressures for women, like your body's supposed to look at X way and all this different stuff, and it's just so unrealistic and uh, unfair for anybody to think that way of themselves. We're never going to be actors. Let me put it that way.
I think 100% that corn gives a unrealistic expectation, and when you are with somebody who's utilized or utilizing that,
Hmm.
it can very, I saw a video and it was so heartbreaking. And it's understandable too, where a woman found out that her significant other, and we've talked about this in videos,
Hmm.
when we were doing the us journal, about how important it is to have candid conversations about hard topics.
Hmm.
And if that's something that you use and would want to continue using, or that you are using, it is important to have that conversation with the other person. And we'll get into the shame aspect
Yeah.
of things. Because, imagine being in a relationship and then suddenly finding out, oh, well, that's what's going on. and especially tie in like maybe your lack of physical intimacy
Mm-hmm.
with your partner, and or even if you have, are having frequent and quality, sexual, I want to say encounters, but sex. um most women do not look the way that these women do.
Yeah.
And I will talk about it from a female, just a physical expectation. If you've had children, if you've, you're not, perfect body, if haven't had augmentation done, even
Yeah.
if you have had augmentation done, like, bodies don't all move the same. And, we don't, I do not know many women who make the same noises as
Mm-hmm.
all the way through. There's so much unrealistic expectation, both physically
Yeah.
and performance wise for both
I mean,
parties.
they're actors, and
Right.
and that's the thing. And I don't want to make this whole episode about this, but I mean, that's the thing. Like, I've watched some interviews on like Two Bears, One Cave.
Hmm.
They had an actress on there, and she's like, "Yeah, all of it's fake. It's all edited. It's really not as good looking as you think it is." And one thing that I wanted to add to what you were saying is, um, yeah, even if you look like this now, even if you look like these actresses now, you won't forever.
Yep.
And the faster you can understand that, and the faster you can find somebody that loves you for who you are, and also the looks, the better.
Right. And I think young men and women who are exposed to that, but especially young men, I feel like, and maybe not more so now, but in the past, like young men who are exposed to that so early, like they don't know what the expectation is, especially if it's not a conversation at home.
Yeah.
That, hey, eh, I mean, it is the largest genre watched in America,
Yeah.
or not in the world,
Yeah.
really.
It's
You
one of the
know,
largest industries out there.
yeah,
Period.
and even like you said, in commercials, everything's so sexualized that how is a young man or woman to know, oh, well, they're just acting, but
Mhm.
this is something I'm going to do in real life, where if I'm watching an action movie, I know I'm not going to drive a race car and then hop out and, do a backflip
Yeah.
off and, slow mo pew pew something and hop on a motorcycle and woo,
Yeah.
this is something that to to further the human race, like everybody with, for the most part, does it. Even, if you, no matter what your sexuality, unless you're abstinent or asexual,
Mhm.
you're procreating, you're doing that, and there, or people who have performance issues or medical issues,
Mhm.
that's a heavy burden to bear.
Yeah.
And to constantly be walking around it. But the video I saw was this woman who had found that out, and you see her go in her room and just turn her mirror around.
Mhm.
And, even in my mind, knowing that that's not realistic, and that, the person that you're with chose to be with you, obviously there's an attraction, you to think, well, what if that is what they're thinking? Because you don't know what your person's thinking
Yeah.
internally. We all have our own inner dialogue, but I'll never live up to that. Even if they know it is acting, they're getting satisfaction and gratification, particularly if you're not having intimacy as frequently. And I know
Mhm.
they're two different things for a lot of people, but it does get commingled. So
Yep.
that was just really heartbreaking. And I think, too, another part of the social, um, uh, stigma is that men are just horn dogs. Like,
Mhm.
that's all they ever think about. That's all they ever want. And, we teach, you see it all over, that women are told, you need to be able to not let yourself be objectified and things like that. But that's not true.
Yeah.
Not all men walk around thinking about that. And I mean, you can really shed some light on that.
Yeah. One of my favorite memes right now is like, first part is, oh, men only want one thing, and then second part's like Toy Story 5.
Right.
Something stupid like that. Um yeah, no, I've heard that all my life. Guys are pigs. Guys only want one thing, all this different stuff. And, I'm sure there is a demographic or a time where that is true. So maybe, a guy and a girl have been dating for a long time and they haven't done anything, they've teased a lot. Yeah, his mind's going to be on that. But that's
Sure, but
again
that
because of the lust thing, because of that. But in my group of friends in high school, in my group of friends whenever I was, in my 20s and things like that, we weren't talking about sex. Like there was one friend that I had that really, he was a horn dog. But even with him, it was like maybe once a week he was talking about it. And that's in high school. That's two 16-year-old guys talking. And then after that, it's like none of my other friends really ever talked about it or,
that wasn't your main focus.
yeah, I've had people where, guys, we talk about, oh, that girl looks good or whatever, but never ever have we ever been like, oh, I would take her home and do an XYZ. And most of the time, most of my conversations in my mid 20s was about D&D.
And I mean, it does exist that there are men who do
Dungeons and Dragons for anybody that doesn't know. It's not some kind of weird
not that kind of dungeon
sex cult.
or that kind of dragon.
Yeah.
I think that there are groups of people who do that. And I think a lot of time that's another social pressure where you're in a group of people who are talking about sex. And I'm not saying that it is wrong to have that discussion. And I'm not saying that it is wrong um, that it's wrong to have open conversations in a healthy manner. But I think when people are like, oh, that is the sole focus of men or this group of people, I think that's really unfair to the average person.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the statistics are on that by any means, but well, for us personally, I would say that it is on my mind. I would be the stereotypical dude, and for many reasons, which we'll get into. But I think about sex way more than you do, and I didn't even realize that until we started having conversation about it.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, like right now in this conversation, I'm reflecting on things. I was brought up in a hair salon. Um, and I also maintain a hair salon. And there's also a lot of women at my workplace. There are more times where I walk through the office or walk through beauty, hair salons and stuff like that. And I hear them talking about, oh, this guy and that guy and, things like that, or what they're thinking than I ever have with my own friends,
Right.
you know. But it is like you said. If you are around those type of people on either side of the field, women or men, if you are around those type of people and they're talking about sex and they're just being horn dogs, it is kind of like, okay, well, I'm a guy, so I need to be talking about this. And even though it kind of makes me uncomfortable, I guess I need to be
Peer
talking about
pressure.
this. Yeah. So I really think that if everybody would just drop these stereotypes of like, hey, everybody's perverts, then everything would be better. Or just start a new one where, hey, girls are the perverts. It's a
Well,
joke.
you know, thinking about like what changed for us, like obviously, having the kids and life sets in and stressors and you're exhausted, you're working all day, uh and you feel comfortable with that person.
Mhm.
It's not kind of the lust dies off, the love sets in, or the lust dies down and that comfort level of being with your person sets in. I know I had a really hard time, and it's kind of evolved, but in the beginning when it started to die off, and especially as like we started to, maybe it was bicker about things here and there where it
Mhm.
wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. When we would go to bed at night, I can distinctly remember, within a few months of being settled into our first house, um, I I would when we would go to bed, we sleep in the buff, and I would touch you like
Mhm.
anywhere. and you didn't respond to that, immediately I thought, I'm unattractive.
Mm.
Like, we were just doing it like rabbits, and now, you're going to bed. I'm, in my mind, giving you the cues
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, I'm interested, or I didn't even want to have to give you the cues. I wanted you to be like, oh, she's touching me. Like, I
Yeah.
want this. And that was so much pressure on myself to feel like I had to do something, but it definitely caused a lot of issue between us
Mm-hmm.
because number one, I wasn't communicating I'm looking for sex.
Yeah.
And there was no way for you to know because we would go to bed all the time in the same, no clothes on.
Yep.
I would always, my hands on your chest, my head's on your chest, my hands on your body. And I can't imagine how that must have felt to be just going to bed with your wife,
Yep.
who you're going to spend every day for the rest of your life, excuse me, waking up next to,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just being there, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, why aren't we having sex?
Yeah. And not answer that, but give a perspective on that. There's a few things there. One, I did kind of explain it to you at some point. Like, one, it is kind of confusing, right? And I'll get back to why that's confusing and why maybe some guys might have a hard time with it. But the other thing is, like, you know, much like a woman will say, I don't want everything to be just about sex.
Right.
I don't want you to, rub my legs or rub my back or whatever and it just be sexualized. I feel the same way sometimes. And I'm sure there's a lot of other guys out there that feels the same way where it's like, I just want, I just want a back massage without it turning sexual.
But
And
that's not what society portrays it
no,
as
no,
at all.
no. But the other thing is, and I might be alone in this. I don't know. Leave a comment down below and tell us if you have the same opinions, but or same thoughts. Especially in the modern era, because just a few years ago, I'm sure this was not drilled into people's heads. Uh, Guys have been so stigmatized over the years that now it is really drilled onto the guys. Hey, you have to have consent. And I just remember that's one of those things, much like I was telling you the other day about the in school, like everybody said, treat others how you want to be treated. Well, I heard and I follow that. I try to follow that as much as I can in my life. Um, this is also something that has been drilled in my head so much where it's like, oh, I need confirmation that this is what's going on, this is what's happening. Like, I need you not to just physically show me, I need you to tell me, hey, let's do this. Do you like this? Is this something that you're interested in? Kind of deal. And I could be absolutely alone in that. But that's one thought that not thought, but that could be one thing subconscious that could have happened.
Well, on that, I think because, especially for anyone, here's the trigger warning, who has had sexual trauma. Um, I think, that can come in a number of ways. It could come from, a religious upbringing where sex was very taboo and you
Mm-hmm.
weren't supposed to talk about it. Definitely not supposed to self gratify,
Yep.
where that was only meant for marriage. After you said I do, and when you don't know what all is out there, like there's two positions
Mm-hmm.
or even one position, and that's what you're supposed to do, and it's supposed to look exactly this way. Even with removing the exposure to corn, um, you know, it can be a very uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
And then for someone who's experienced, being raped
Well,
or
let me touch on that first part first before you go into that
yeah, yeah,
situation. Um, Outside of religious perspectives, this right here, what I'm about to say, it, it is rampant right now, where guys are being raised up by their moms. The moms don't want to have this uncomfortable conversation with their sons. Like, my mom never taught me about this. Her sex talk with me, whoops, Well, there went my fidget and my pin. The very first sex talk that she ever had with me was, well, girls have two tubes. And that's about as far as it
I
went.
didn't know that till I was much later in life, by the
Yeah.
way.
But I never talked about, self gratification. The only time that we ever talked about corn was whenever she was shaming me for it. Um, there was no conversations, and that passed over to my brother. He never had older brother never had a conversation with me. The only conversation about any of this that I ever had was um a sex ed course in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
That
Which
was
is
it.
crazy to me.
That was it. I didn't know what
I mean, I'm glad that
I didn't know what a condom was until I was in middle school. I thought if you peed in a urinal, you could catch AIDS. I thought it just swam back up into you.
I thought you could sit on a toilet seat and get pregnant.
Yep. So, again, that's why it's so important to have these kind of conversations with your kids at an appropriate age, and you can kind of have a spectrum of conversations, starting with
Science, man. Start with
I mean,
science.
well, do science, but you can kind of fluff it up a little bit for younger kids, like somebody 5th grade or above. You can kind of fluff it up a little bit until they get into later middle school and then high school, and whenever they get their driver's license, you really need to just have the talk. Like, there's no beating around the bush there. You need to say, hey, health department's right over here. You can get condoms there, birth control there, all this good stuff. You can do that thing and you need to. 'Cause I'm not raising a baby, and if you have a baby, you're old enough to go get your own house.
I'd like to have a whole episode dedicated to that because I when I said science, I think that a lot of I feel very thankful that you and I have raised our children in an environment where sex is not taboo
Yeah.
and that we're able to have very candid conversations with them.
Yep.
But I think the scientific approach, if you are uncomfortable having that conversation with your kids, just them understanding like the science behind that,
Yeah.
because they're going to go to school and they're going to learn what they're going to learn. And
Yeah.
again, I think this is a great family episode about how to have that conversation with your kids.
And that conversation isn't just I want to make this part clear. It's not just about sex either.
Right.
This could be testicular health, ovarian health, breast health, menstrual cycles and tracking those. It's a whole spectrum of things that, like you said, we'll have a bigger conversation about, but I really wanted to stress that point.
I agree. So back to as far as a consenting couple.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things that come into play when I think about how my perspective of sex was. When the frequency I'm making notes 'cause I took notes. I'm trying to be better about that. But I would try to just have this candid conversation, but there were so many things that I feel like were really important to me to talk about.
No, if you need a
and
card or notes or whatever, that's fine.
and a sticky note. Um,
That's for your rabbit hole.
right. This was the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
This was the summary of
That's
it.
funny.
Looking back at that, so in our relationship, you were very comfortable with just being yourself with me.
Mhm.
And I, through experience, especially in my youth and the things that happened, I very much correlated sex with love.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be loved so badly
Mhm.
that I thought, well, if I do that, then that equates to love
Mhm.
or attraction. Like, okay, well, if you find me attractive, your body's going to react.
Mhm.
And then, I can distinctly remember times that I didn't even want to have sex.
Mhm.
I just wanted to be wanted. And in my mind, there's kind of two things here. I feel like when you're getting we've called it the love cup, or I've referred to it as that. If you
Yeah.
haven't watched our 5 love languages, videos, please go back and watch those because this will make a lot more sense if you're not familiar with it. And even if you aren't, the concept, I mean, I feel like it is good. I don't know that we really honed in on making sure that we were loving each other in a way that we both felt loved.
Yeah.
It wasn't till even in the last year that quality time has been something that I feel like I've really learned.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we don't spend every day together, not that we aren't exceptionally close, but what quality time looks like.
Yeah.
Or for me, words of affirmation, that's something that you've always struggled with. And again, another podcast episode about how your mindset can change. But physical touch wasn't necessarily my number one.
Yeah, mine neither.
That, what is your number one now?
I do. Well, let me rephrase it. I guess for you and me, I do love physical touch. Whenever it comes to like relationships that more family relationships, not husband and wife relationships, I'm not very touchy.
Right.
I don't like it whenever people try to give me hugs or anything like that.
Right.
You know.
And we didn't have the dialogue about a lot of stuff. We had a great relationship. We talked about everything, but even until recently, sex was not necessarily one of those. And if it was not a, sorry, the dog, a positive conversation. It usually was because of me feeling, sorry about that. Dogs interfered. You might have caught a glimpse of the big black bull. I don't know why. I think he was a bull in a
He is
china
not
shop.
a bull. He is
He's
a little
not,
baby
but
boy.
he is a bull in a
and
china shop.
He's just a tired boy. That's all.
Anyway, he was super cute.
And he wouldn't lay down. He wants to get up in my lap and go to sleep.
He loves me the most. It's okay.
That's okay that you can think that.
But after experiencing the trauma, I'm trying to get back to where I was.
Yeah, we don't know exactly where we were.
Yeah,
so.
it's just flowing in conversation.
You know, one thing that I wanted to touch on while you were speaking, you were talking about how to you, sex is a view or a expression of love, like
That was
receiving it.
Got it.
But for me, like as you were saying that, I was like, wow, that's kind of wild. Like I understand that. I understand that from a hey, sexual trauma whenever I was a child aspect. I get that. But for me, it's so like sex is such a byproduct of everything else. Like so many people. And so I know I'm the outlier, but so many people are like, oh yeah, like sex is the kind of finish line, and that's what indicates love. But to me, that's such a byproduct. There's so many times where
you're gonna get right into the thought that's coming in my. You're like stealing a thought from my mind.
I think I'm about to pivot from what you're thinking. So for me, there's so many times where it's like, without being too graphic, afterward, I'm so, I would rather you just lay on me, and that closeness is what's more important to me than anything else.
So you didn't pivot, but it is, I guess, where I was going. And he does this a lot, and not that I'm mad at it, but it's like I'm going to say something and he steals my thunder because he knows
we just finished each other's sandwiches. That's
exactly.
All. Okay.
That's what I was going to say. So I thought for a long time that I don't know that I thought that was the ultimate expression, but the love languages, right? Because words of affirmation was not your thing. And it's not, and even them, like my hyper focus went from sex to love languages, right? And because my cup in my mind and in my heart at the time was not being filled. And that was a lot to do with my own hangups, my own trauma, my own insecurities. I feel like I needed that to feel like I was wanted because, okay, he's not saying these things to me. And, you've always been excellent at acts of service. But like, let's say you forgot to do something I'd asked you to do. That was just like, okay, well, dagger to the heart. But I think what was happening is I wasn't being I wasn't receiving the love that you were giving me in the ways that you knew how.
Mm.
We were not having dialogue about it. We had not gone into the 5 love languages at that point. There was no open conversation. It was just me saying, I mean, I did say, oh, I wish that you would go, all the things that you did in the puppy dog stage. And I can't imagine the pressure that felt like, because you were loving me in all the ways that you knew how.
Yep.
And because we had not really worked on our relationship, we were surviving a lot of things that had happened. I mean, today is 6 years, but I feel like we've lived a lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
And it feels like we've always been together. Excuse me. But it also feels like we are just now really hitting our stride, right?
Most people get the 7-year itch. We're getting the 7-year or 6-year. Freaking here we are. We finally made it.
You ain't itchy ever. I'm manifesting that. I think that I was trying to find that fulfillment in the bedroom, because when we did connect at that level, it was very passionate, and I have loved the fact that we've always cuddled. And like, I can't think of a time, like, if you go to bed and you aren't like telling me to come lay on your chest, which I didn't even like, that was never a thing for me. I've never experienced that. Like, I remember the first time I woke up and like I'd had a crick in my neck from laying on your chest and falling asleep, and I couldn't turn my head, and I was so happy with that. It hurt so bad, but I was so
Everybody look.
Yeah, exactly. Look, he loves me. But that was just such a joyous moment for me, because that's something that I'd not really experienced. And for so long, you were trying to love me in the ways that are so much more meaningful in the long run. Because you're right. Like, what if one day we woke up and that part of our bodies didn't work? Thank God for technological advancements and stuff, because I think that sex is a very important component to a relationship, but it's not everything.
Yeah.
And it's not can it be an indicator of something being wrong? Yes. Is it the indicator that something is wrong? No. But in my mind, I walked around with this pressure of, first of all, I've never said no. Like, unless I was sick, and it's not like you ask.
I have to sneeze. I'm sorry. Nope, just do this time.
Anomalies.
It's getting like that. I don't know what's going on.
Bless you.
Oh, I feel the blessings.
I don't think that, like, you've never had to hear no, but also it's never been. There are times that I would be so distraught that we weren't having sex. And it's not like we've gone months without it. Like, we have a very, like, okay, what would you consider? And they answered with their own perspective in their podcast.
Yeah.
But, until I heard that, like, what would you consider a healthy marriage, like, frequency?
I wanna before I answer that, circle back around. The reason that you haven't had to tell me no is because I can read your body language and kind of see she's not feeling it today. She's stressed out. She does not just lay down and watch TikTok. There's something going on. So let me figure that out and just spend time with her versus and talk with her instead of pressuring for that. And plus, it's our love life as far as sexual intimacy goes is so just like natural for the most part. Like, don't really have to ask one another. We just kind of feel like the chemistry, and that's whenever it happens. But to answer your question,
before you go off that, I want to give perspective, because there may be somebody out there who is struggling with or going through what I feel like I've been through. And I admittedly, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, there have been times where I would go in there and I'd watch TikTok or YouTube or doom scroll, whatever it is.
every time I hear doom now, I can't help but think of the Costco guys. Boom or doom.
Right.
Oh my God. God, blink once or twice, man.
I thought you were talking about me. I'm like, I am. Um,
If I blinked anymore, I wouldn't have my eyes open.
I think this is why conversation is so important, because you reading my body language, I think is incredible. Like you do know me.
Yeah.
There are a lot of times that I wanted you to initiate, and we're going to get to that topic in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be angry scrolling
Mm-hmm.
because I felt like you had not given me any affection or love in a way that I was receiving it. And you took that as I wasn't interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 100% interested in you giving me that attention.
Mm-hmm.
Or there have been times where I definitely wanted to. Um, there would be times that I was doing that, and all I wanted was for you to come initiate, or for you to fill that cup of mine, not just sexually, but love wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so there may have been times that you thought I wasn't interested, and I definitely was. But because I would say I'm hypersexual, and I've always been, I think it's been more on my mind than a lot of people are,
Yeah.
we ladies do talk about things. And I think that I am an outlier compared to what I've come to understand from people that I've had conversations with, my friends, close friends. Um, that being said, um, I appreciate the fact that you've never just came in there like, oh, I need to be satisfied and then whatever.
Yeah. I need to get one off, and that's it.
I was going to say that, but you said it and I didn't.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
And there are a lot of people like that.
Absolutely. And so, I also think that, I mean, I am in my prime, like, so more so now than ever,
Mm-hmm.
like my estrogen is flowing, and I think the confidence shift has come definitely more recently than before, but
Yeah.
I was not confident in my body. For a long time, I would feel like I needed to wear a bra to bed because I, was not satisfied. I had the expectation in myself to look like someone who was an entertainer,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, you've always, what my body looked like. You've seen it the whole time. Why would you be with me if you weren't attracted to me? But I felt like, oh, and a lot of times when we did have sex, I was in my head about, do I look right in this position?
Mm-hmm.
Is this something where he's grossed out by me? And it was very hard to enjoy intimacy at times because of what was going on in my head.
That's how I think that's how most people are, unless you're a narcissist or something. I think most people are kind of like in their head, like, oh, is she, attracted to this, or does she like this, or is this how she wants it, or whatever. Like most people, I think, are in their head during and trying to satisfy their partner in different ways.
Um, I think that this is where the shift came in.
I didn't answer your question, by the
Oh,
way.
yeah. Please do.
What was the question again?
How frequent do you think sex needs to be in a
Needs to
healthy
be as
relationship?
at least once a week, maybe depending on stress level. There's a lot of variables. So if it's stressful, once every 2 weeks. If it's not stressful, at least once a week. If you're having a great old time, then as much as possible.
Right. A great old time. All I could think is they'll have a gay old time.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
That's Flintstones.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, I thought so. Okay, so I mean, it's not realistic to do it every day.
Yeah.
I mean,
At bare minimum, you're going to be dehydrated.
Right. I mean, it is realistic to do it every day. Let me not say that. I think if you have yourself under a pressure of a certain amount of time, like, okay, Sunday to Sunday, and it's been a week, like I distinctly remember in our relationship periods of where I've been like, oh, it's been 3 days, it's been 5 days, it's been, because it was weighing on my mind so heavily because we weren't filling each other's love languages,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't dialoguing about it. So maybe you were fulfilled, but I was not. And then add into that my confidence issues and feeling like that was how I knew that you still wanted me. And especially when I was going through things
Yep.
emotionally, like that was the barometer for how our relationship was going and your feelings toward me. And I'm so sad to think about all the times that I've allowed that to get in the way, because especially recently, like, and it really solidified today. I did not recognize that I was like pushing myself to want to initiate intimacy or you to be intimate with me sexually, because I think there's, when I want to differentiate in a moment. But I was feeling like I was turned on, and therefore I wanted to have sex with you. And then in the middle of when you did engage with me, then I was stuck in my head about it
Yep.
because of my, do I look right? Does it feel right? Is he happy? You know, heaven forbid, and another peer pressure that, you and maybe you finished and I did not. And then like, okay, you went to sleep and then I didn't tell you, I wasn't communicating with you like, hey, I want to versus not, like
Yep.
in sex. Side note, little asterisk, insert commentary here. You can have sex with somebody and or have sexual interaction, and not both of you have to orgasm for it to be satisfying. There are many a times where if let's say you had an orgasm and I did not, if I never got to, I would be okay because I am satisfied satisfying you. Like it
Yep.
is a different type of sexual gratification or intimacy gratification.
Yep.
So I think that there needs to stop being the stigma of both of you have to.
Yep.
And the pressure of that must be immense. And then heaven forbid one of you is like supercharged and like you finish first, and then the other person maybe doesn't feel the need to,
or a bigger issue that has happened with us, and I'm sure with thousands if not millions of other people, is, and I think this is more for the women than it is for the men, could be wrong, is you get too wrapped up in your own head and you can't finish because
women
by the
all the
time
time.
by the time you get to the finish line, you're just like, oh well, he must not be attracted to me. Is the oven on? All these different things, and it just rips you out of that moment.
I could not agree more. And then there was a lot of times where I felt pressured to hurry up.
Yep.
Like that has been something that I struggled with for a very long time. If let's say, you finish first, and then I did communicate like, hey, I would like to, I need that release, or I want that release. Um, and then it wasn't happening quickly. All I could think about is, does he think that he's not doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job?
And
Is
that
there
is the
something
thought.
wrong with me? Is there something wrong with us? Is it that, he doesn't want to? Why did I have to ask him? Like, I think I've seen a number of podcasts or videos or commentary about, and I think that I do want to say to both parties involved, because whether you're in whatever kind of relationship you're in, that if you do finish first, I think satisfying your partner and being attuned to, okay, I'm satisfied, am I satisfying them,
Yep.
is very important.
Yep.
And just assuming that, all right, well, I'm done. There's no other way to, there's stores, there's, your body. You don't have to be having sex to orgasm, right?
Yep.
But if you were to do that and your partner did not get satisfied and you just go to sleep, or you don't pay attention to that, I do think that if you're not communicating, like, I don't think that I should have to say every time, like, hey, will you take care of that for me?
Yep.
It should be a natural thing for you to continue and maybe you need a recoup. Maybe you need a breather and you can keep going.
Yep.
Unless you're communicating, no one knows. But to just make the assumption that the other person is going to say, "Hey, I still want to,
Yep.
enjoy this, not enjoy this. I would still like to have an orgasm, or I would like for you to satisfy me." I think that would put a lot of pressure on the other person to have to communicate that. I
Mhm.
do think that there is a courtesy of like, hey, I know that, you know, things happen too fast, or maybe I was wrapped up in satisfying you, and then I wasn't thinking about my body. I was thinking about yours.
Mhm.
Um, Communication.
For all you young bucks out there that are insecure and don't want your girl to have toys, you're robbing yourself. You're robbing her. You're robbing the situation. You're robbing, you know, things that could be fun. And I think this video might end up having to be a part two because whenever I looked at it earlier, it was already an hour. So I think we should land the plane here and then continue
Yeah.
the on episode two. But you're robbing yourself of a lot of fun because the biggest insecurity for me in that is in going to the toy store is, you know, getting something bigger or something that looks too phallus. I don't like that. And everybody can have their own taste in what they want, and you can compromise and come up with something that fits the moment, and then you can really enjoy intimacy and enjoy sex because you could start off with a rose toy on her, and then you can move on to just you and her, and then one thing or another, maybe she's really close and just you're too close, and so she pulls out the rose toy again, and that's how things end up. Or like you're saying, maybe the guy finishes, girl gets her toy, and then everything's done, you know?
And there are toys for guys too. But I think that's a really good place, like you said, to land the plane. Come back for part two because there's a number of good points and really some tips that we want to give you guys on how to overcome this if you're struggling with sexual intimacy. And we'll talk about more about intimacy in the
Yep.
next one. But I think it's a great conversation. Leave your comments below. Let us know what you're thinking. Send us an email if you have if you have questions, or you just want to share what you're going through, and we'll be happy to answer those. Again, you're welcome to share with us, and we do not have to make it an episode. We can have conversations with you guys without it being a podcast topic.
Hmm.
Everything can remain anonymous. This is a very important topic,
Yep.
and so just like we're talking about it, we'll come back for part two.
Yep.
And share some more insight on that,
All right. And as always, stay a little odd.
because we are.